It's got a deep smoky taste. That deep pink color looks really, really good. And the rub that we put on with all the peppercorns and everything just has a lot of bite. What's going on, adventurers? My name's Travis. Welcome back to another project. A couple months ago, I converted our Brinkmann charcoal cabinet smoker over to propane, and since then I've been using it a ton. I've done 2 turkeys, I made some jalapeno cheddar smokies, I also made some venison kielbasa. It turned out great. If you want to check out that video, I'll post a link here. You can click over, check it out. The next challenge that I wanted to try, it's something I've wanted to do for a long time, is make pastrami. Pastrami is that delicious deli meat. It's a cured meat that's then smoked, and then just prior to slicing it, you steam it in the oven. It gives it this really nice velvety texture. It has a nice smoky flavor. It's just delicious. So that's what today's video is all about. I'm going to be making pastrami with about a 4-pound venison roast. Now the recipe I'll be using today, I found on the Meateater website. It calls for elk pastrami, but really you can use anything you have on hand. I'm gonna be using venison. If you have beef or whatever you have on hand, you can use that. I'll post a link in the description below so you can check out the recipe. Really the only thing that you need that is a little bit different is curing salt. I'll post a link in the description for some curing salt you can pick up. We're just using pink salt number 1. This is different than table salt, so you want to make sure that you're following a recipe or following the manufacturer's directions, otherwise you can get really sick. So I'll take you through the entire process. We're gonna have to make a curing brine for the roast, which you'll have to sit in for a few days. Then we'll smoke it in our converted propane smoker. Then finally get it steamed and sliced up and give it a try. Now, if you want to check out the process for converting a charcoal smoker over to propane like we did, I'll post a link to the video for the conversion. You can follow along. It's a really easy project. If you have an older charcoal smoker laying around, it's something really easy. You can switch it over and then have that reliable, constant temperature with using propane. If you're new to the channel, we are all about projects that add adventure to your life. So anything that gets you up off the couch and out the door on your next adventure. If you haven't already, please take a second, hit that subscribe button, and remember to click the little bell icon to be notified every time a new video drops. So let's jump in and start this venison pastrami. The first thing that we need to do for this recipe is make our curing brine. So I've got 1 gallon of water in the pot here. I'm going to get that heated up. The reason we're heating this water up is to be able to dissolve the salt and sugar in this recipe. While that's heating up, I'll take you through the ingredients we're going to be adding to this brine. Now remember, I'll post a link in the description to this recipe, so don't worry about having to write stuff down. You can check out the full recipe over on the Meateater website. So starting off, we have 2 tablespoons of pink salt. This can also be known as Instacure number 1. You just want to be making sure that you're using a curing salt and not getting mixed up with some of the pink salt that you see in the grocery store. That's just regular salt. Again, with curing salts, just make sure you're following the directions on the package or a known recipe to make sure that you get the right ratio. Next, we've got 3 tablespoons of pickling spice, 1 cup of salt. The recipe calls for kosher salt. I only had table salt laying around the house, so we're gonna be using that and it should turn out just fine. Then finally, 3/4 of a cup of brown sugar. Now once the water is warmed up, I'll add all these ingredients and stir it until all the sugar and salt is dissolved. So now that the brine is complete, we have to cool it off. So I put the pot into the fridge to allow it to cool down to room temperature. Now I set the roast into our pot that we're going to be brining the roast in and pour the cooled brining mixture over top. The most important thing is that this roast is completely submerged in the brining mixture. Now as it absorbs salt, it might start wanting to float, so using something heavy like a plate to put on top of it and hold it down will make sure it's submerged. Now this roast has to brine for 4 to 5 days, so I'm gonna set it into the refrigerator and let it cure. So we'll let the roast rest in the refrigerator, and I'll see you back in a couple short days. The roast has been in the curing solution for the past 5 days. Pulling the plate off the roast and pulling the roast out, you can see it's got a really nice deep pink color from that cure. First, I have to rinse off the roast. What you're doing here is just getting some of that pickling spice off, any of the extra salt. You just want the outside of the roast to be nice and clean. Now that it's rinsed off, I'm going to set it on a cutting board and let it rest for about an hour. This will allow it to dry out a little bit. While the roast is drying, I'm going to mix up the rub. I'm going to put these ingredients into a mortar and pestle and just grind them up a little bit. Now that the roast is dry, I can take the rub ingredients and spread it all over the roast. You want to make sure to get a good thick coating all over the roast. While that sits, I'm going to fire up the smoker and get it up to 225 degrees. For smoking chips, I'm going to be using a blend of applewood as well as mesquite. It should give a really nice, deep, complex, smoky flavor. Now I can put the roast onto the smoker. I'm going to insert a temperature probe into the center. I'm going to smoke this roast until the internal temperature reaches 145 degrees. That should take a couple hours. The entire time it's on the smoker, I'm going to make sure I restock the chip pan to have a lot of good smoke onto this roast. So we're about halfway through the smoking process, so we'll go take a look and see how this roast is coming along. Our roast is up to temperature 145 degrees. It's time to pull it out of the smoker. Opening up the smoker, it just smells incredible. The roast looks delicious, but we're not quite ready to slice this roast up yet. One of the most important steps in making pastrami is steaming the roast before you slice it. So to steam it, I'm going to take a roasting pan, put a wire rack at the bottom of the roasting pan, and fill it up with just about 2 inches of water. Now you don't want the water touching the roast, you want to have the roast suspended over the water. Now you want to cover the roasting pan with either a lid or some tin foil, something to keep that steam in there. Now we're going to put the roasting pan in the oven at 275 degrees for about an hour and a half. Once that water heats up at the bottom of the pan, it's going to create a lot of steam in that roasting pan and finish off this pastrami. Oh man, the house is smelling incredible with that pastrami steaming. We just finished up our timer, so I'm going to open this thing up and take a look at the finished product. Now before we slice up this pastrami, we want to let it rest. I'm going to let it rest for about 30 minutes or until it's fairly cool to the touch where I can handle it comfortably. Now you could use a sharp knife and cut it up yourself, but what I'm going to be using is a meat slicer. This slicer just cuts the pastrami beautifully. You can see that really deep pink color as the pastrami comes off the slicer. Trying this pastrami, it tastes incredible. It's got a deep smoky taste. That deep pink color looks really, really good, and the rub that we put on with all the peppercorns and everything just has a lot of bite. I'm really excited to get this pastrami onto a sandwich. So you can see making pastrami isn't all that hard. It just takes a few days to get the pastrami all brined, but really mixing up the brine and smoking it, it doesn't take a lot of time. Now, if you want to try this recipe yourself, I'll post a link in the description below. Like I said, I got this off the Meateater website. If you check out this recipe, as well as a lot of the other recipes they have on the website, it's really, really good stuff for wild game. But, you know, if you're not a hunter, you can use beef or just other meats as a substitute. Now, if you have any questions about the process, please post a comment in the comment section below. If you haven't already, please take a second, hit that subscribe button, and remember to click the little bell icon to be notified every time a new video drops. So that's it for this project, but I hope to see you back again really soon for another adventure project.